Hey guys.
Hey,
Oh, sorry. I've been a little out of touch recently. It's just I've got so much going on. I'm so stressed all the time and I don't know what to do.
yeah, I mean, you could try going to therapy maybe.
Or maybe try volunteering.
Yeah, those are good ideas. Great ideas even. Or we could start a podcast.
No,
No.
Welcome everybody to Roll Havoc. I'm your host, Jack Steelman. The cast here is really excited to talk about our TTRPG experiences and party dynamic. We have a ton of stories from the table and want to share them so people can have an inside look at what a functional, long-running game can look like. And we're hoping our natural ones give you inspiration. Now, keep in mind, this is more like a behind-the-scenes type situation. If you're looking for a star-studded cast of voice actors to play D&D for your enjoyment, you've come to the wrong place. We only have regular studs here. That being said, let's introduce the cast. Do you like that one? That was pretty good.
Not bad.
I can't prove it, but I think he's actually a beholder crime lord who lives beneath Waterdeep. Please welcome my friend and my favorite DM, Ben Grunzel.
Hey, everybody, and I can confirm that I am not a beholder, which is what a normal human thing to say, right?
Yeah, convincing as always.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. And also, history shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. Josh Plotkin.
Thanks, Jack. I look forward to shape-shifting into the hearts and minds of our listeners.
So we've been playing D&D together for a long time, and I want to get into that and talk about our games. But I think first we should talk about our individual backstories, as it were. Of course, that's where I'm going to start. Ben, how about you let's go ahead and start with you. When did you start playing D&D? What's your experience?
Yeah, I got into D&D in 4th grade. A friend of mine had some books that I thought looked really cool, and basically just started kind of collecting D&D books because it took me a while to really play regularly. But so I didn't even know where to get started. I had basic, 1st edition, 2nd edition, and then I started branching out to World of Darkness, GURPS, some of the Palladium stuff. I had all kinds of games that I wasn't even playing that much. I was just reading them. And then third edition came out when I was in college, and all of a sudden it was the hot new thing. It was easier to teach people, and I've been gaming pretty regularly ever since, still collecting lots of new books all the time. So and mostly DMing. I love DMing, so that's pretty much my whole experience has been doing that.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think Josh can probably agree with this. With like finding someone who prefers DMing is very kind of rare, and I think
You're a unicorn.
Yeah, a lot of people,
purple unicorn.
A lot of people are like me, where it's just like, yeah, I'll DM if I have the right group and I'm in the mood. But yeah, I definitely prefer playing because I'd rather kind of sit inside a character and kind of make those types of decisions. But why do you prefer DMing?
I like creating a world. Like one of the very first D&D, I got like beginner sets I had like a little short chapter about creating your own dungeons. And I'm like, I can make my own dungeons. I can make my own monsters. To me, that's a big part of the creative outlet of D&D for me is making stuff to put in games. So I love world building. I also just have, I think, very particular ideas on how I like games to be run, and not that I always hit those ideals, but I like doing it myself. I like running it. I like controlling the world, and just always trying to be better at it too.
Cool. So Josh, let's talk about how long you've been playing D&D. When did you start, and what got you into it?
Well, let's see. I saw a monster manual when I was 16 years old. I didn't know what it was. It was one of my friends I played Magic the Gathering with, pulled me over into Barnes and Nobles after school and was like, check out this. And I was like, there's some sick illustrations. He's like, and look at what it does. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. At the time, I really wasn't looking for another another nerdy thing to do. I felt I was already as off-putting as I possibly as a self-loathing 16-year-old could be. But when I got to college as an 18-year-old, then I was able to chase a girl who liked D&D.
The plot thickens.
So yeah, I did play my first game then, and I was like, whatever. And of course, I made a druid, first character. Super confusing, had no idea what was going on. But like in that first session, the person who played the Wolf Boy Ranger did hop on that table and start howling. And for some reason, I just knew I was home. You know, like this is
like,
what I'm about.
My
And
people.
And I just remember, like, instead of studying, just staying up all night, like making characters. There was something that was very similar to it from me loving Magic, is that there was mechanics. It's the same way of like looking at like a manual for a machine. It's just that you got to make the machine. You know, you have to put the parts together. You build it as you level, and you get to see what it does. And then
it's a machine of your imagination.
Exactly. It's machinations in your imagination. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thanks for helping me come up with that one.
Sorry.
Nice.
I was just thinking, it's like it is just like a machine of like within storytelling. It's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a lot of character development. That first game taught me that it wasn't just about the mechanics. It had a lot to do with what you want to do with your character. And then of course, having a DM that was open to what you wanted to do. Of course, on that, at the same time, I learned how important it is for a DM to stop you from doing everything that you want to do.
That is really important.
Which
because sometimes you go
why Ben is so great for putting up with me as I try to break all of his games.
I think we're all very respectful of how good a DM Ben is, because if Ben says there's a problem, we're like, well, there's a fucking problem.
Sometimes, I still want to challenge him a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. He puts up with a lot of that stuff. So I think that's really good. So I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for a long time. My family played D&D together when I was I was very little. One of the first books I read was the second edition Player's Handbook. I didn't know what it meant. I started playing the First Quest box my brother had for second edition. And actually the first character I took to level 20 was the rogue character card that was in there named Slinker. I made a character. I just changed his name to something else, and I took him all the way to level 20 in second edition.
And that's why you got your new nickname.
Slinker?
Oh yeah.
Is that my new nickname?
It might be. It is for the next 15 minutes.
You're gonna have to talk to Gary Gygax about that shit, because TSR owned it.
Lost my opportunity there, sadly.
Yeah.
I remember the First Quest box set. I remember running that in elementary or middle school for a friend.
We played it so much, like I memorized the maps, all the encounters, all that stuff from then. And then so like I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons when third edition hit. It was like, so it blew my freaking mind to go from like THAC0 to attack bonus, and it was everything. It's been right in the world since, definitely took another rogue and a monk actually to level 20 in third edition. So like I've been playing with pretty much just my family and my brother and some friends, like through one shots. I didn't really ever finish like a campaign too much after that, but it was just always really cool to get into like this, like tell my own version of the stories and stuff that I was watching and like reading books and like fantasy novels and all this stuff. So I always thought it was really neat to write my own characters, and like everyone has like that part of themselves they put into the characters, and it's kind of neat to have through those fantasies and that kind of direction. It's kind of neat. And then I actually had a lull for a little while, and then I met you guys. and then I think that's probably where we could start.
It was a dark and stormy night, as I recall. Well,
it
wasn't Florida, so that's just kind of a good guess.
I was drinking Dark and Stormies. Ooh. And it was night. That's correct.
It was definitely dark somewhere and stormy somewhere.
It was definitely dark at that goth club we hung out at.
Yes, it was definitely dark. There was I do remember that. So we were at that goth bar around when we were all in or with the cast of the burlesque and fire shows that were going on there. And we had, I'm pretty sure it was just before we were about to go on, and I was having my one drink that I had before shows. Ben looks over and goes, and I'm like, I'm in that headspace. I'm like, show headspace. And then Ben just goes, so when are we going to play D&D? And it was just like, well,
yeah.
Can we do it right now? Can we?
Yeah, you were off your game that night after that. No, just kidding.
No, I was more on my game. I was just like, no.
On your game. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
It was good.
It's good. It's good.
So,
It's good.
but yeah, so we kind of started there. We started off with a couple of one shots. I remember that. And then when we all kind of dispersed, we were between Colorado and Seattle and Savannah. We all like decided like, let's play online. Like we're all in different states. Like we can make it happen through Roll20. Let's do it. And so I think that's probably when like that campaign definitely turned into something like pretty crazy, pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And that was the Eberron campaign. And that was, I think we started that would be 2016. So that was, it was about 6 years ago. It was about 6 years ago when that game kicked off, and we wrapped it up. We played that online for just up until like the year before last. So like 2020. Yeah. Through the pandemic, actually. Yeah. Through the start of the pandemic is when we started just like kind of cranking on it.
The fire and the flames.
Yeah. So we have a lot of experience separately. We have a lot of experience. And I think our separate experiences kind of made it to where our dynamic is really unique. We are friends first, like we're really good friends. And of course, with the main campaign we play with Trevor's a good friend as well. We're friends first, and we know a lot, and we try to let that not get in the way as much as we do to try to let have as good a time. So that's kind of like, I think, where we could kind of talk about our dynamic. And Ben, what do you like about the games that we run?
I mean, like I said, a big part of it is the fact that we're friends first. Like we have plenty of experience hanging out with each other outside of just playing games, which is, I've always found it is easier to convert friends into playing games than it was to meet gamers and try to make them friends.
Preach.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it, is that we all, which makes it easier to game, because like, when it's a long campaign, that can get, you start having trouble with scheduling, or like, certain frustrations with how the game's going can happen, and we can just talk about it, and it's not a big deal, because our ego isn't about, playing the game first and respecting each other second. We're really good friends. So that's a big part of us gaming together. And I mean, besides that, we just have a good mix of styles, and it just works.
Yeah. We'll definitely get into those styles here in a second. I want to talk about that because I think that's really important. But I think we can get a little bit more into like, what do we actually love about the game itself? And I think that'll explain a lot about how we interact with each other. I know for myself, like I said, I kind of like the fantasy of like, having a part of yourself in a character and like taking that off on an adventure and telling the stories. But I also do like the mechanics of it, right? There is that satisfaction of building a character that works in a certain way. You have an idea, and it's like mechanically you want it to work. I really like that.
The satisfaction is in rolling lots of dice.
There is a satisfaction.
That's your reward.
Yeah. But yeah, Josh, what do you love about playing tabletop RPGs in general?
Well, it's actually just tabletop RPGs. I do love like what you said about investing a little bit of yourself, finding a part of your personality that's going to satisfy something. For like that first game I played, I picked Druid just because I had a lot to do with wild animals when I was younger. I thought it was kind of romantic being a warrior for nature. So, there's something you can grab onto, and it's something you can play with. If you ever take any like improvisational acting class, any type of acting classes, they'll always tell you that the best way to get into character is to attach it to some emotional experience that you've had yourself, right? So you get the best out of somebody when it's that type of RPG. Then you combine it with math combined into math, attacking math, divided by math, which is still just more math. And it's once you play enough RPGs, once you play enough mechanical things, everything you realize starts kind of making similar outcomes, right? Even if it's a different rule set of the game. So for me, a lot of it is finding out how to make that system work for that same outcome that you wanted to get, even though it's a different math problem.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think exploring mechanics is kind of a big part of tabletop RPGs, like for sure, like digging into those rule books, digging into how characters are supposed to interact with the world and how characters are supposed to interact with the monsters and stuff like that. Ben, I think you touched a little bit on about what you like about the game itself. You like creating that world. What else do you really love about playing games?
I mean, yeah, the creative part of it is huge. I think it's interesting that you guys were both kind of talking about how you like coming up with a character and then through story and mechanics, like living out that character in a world or in an adventure. And I come at it from the opposite route of, I like medieval history, I like folklore and fantasy novels, and I like taking those and I want to translate those to a world for the players to interact with. I want it to, I always kind of have a goal of wanting to seem like a living world where your actions actually matter. And that's, the live experience of playing a game can be a lot of fun. Like, there's a lot of mechanical stuff choices that happen away from the table, but when the players surprise me, when I surprise the players, those are like my favorite moments. When something that unexpected wrench, there's a lot of talk about like players going off the rails and like, can you handle it? And like, that's my favorite thing is when the player, that's the whole point. I'm just setting up a situation for you guys to interact with. Yeah.
Marty, where we're going, we don't need rails.
I'm already understanding our party dynamic a little better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. And you talk about personal goals. I think that's really kind of cool. Personal goals in a game, I think that's very important to have as like a player and a DM, but also it's kind of like a group. And so like personal goals for me, like I really dig arc and growth in a character. I think that's really cool. Taking a character from like who has, maybe not necessarily like you have all their flaws fleshed out in the beginning, but by the time you're done with that character, it feels like they actually went through a story and it wasn't just like a meat grinder. It wasn't just like a gauntlet, where it's just like, you're the wizard, you're thrown into the gauntlet, you win or die. It's like, that's, I want like an arc, I want story. And so a goal for me is always having like some kind of like arc that character completes. And I think I definitely fall under that role player or actor archetype in these situations. I think I'm very much so like, I want to role play. I want to like do the goofy voices. I want to like get deep. I want to like think about like character emotion and think about how they're feeling. And like, I want to go through what a person in that mindset, what kind of decisions they would make. And like, I think that's always really fun for me, is kind of like the acting part of it, the role playing part of it. I like hamming it up a little bit. And I think that's a huge motivator for me too, is to get to those points where it's like, all right, this is a huge climactic point in the story and I want to engage with it. That's always really kind of cool for me. Josh, do you have any goals or like preferences for your play style when when we're at the table?
So it's interesting. I honestly like, if it makes sense because of what happens throughout the story for like the character to change, I'm all for it. But I think what actually interests me more is my character, the PCs, being a flat character, protagonist, and changing the world around them as they've moved through it. So it's like you even you even run into villains. Maybe you don't kill them, maybe they get away. Maybe you even turn those villains into allies.
That's a very kung fu type of mentality, where it's like you realize that this character doesn't grow. Everyone he encounters grows around him. That's a really cool take.
One of the most pop culture well-known ones is actually like Goku from Dragon Ball Z.
Okay.
He's a flat character. He's the same. I just want to be the strongest. I will fight to be the strongest type of thing. I protect my friends and family, and that is just how it works. Now he goes up against, like Vegeta is a villain, and eventually he's his like best friend, right? But he doesn't change, but he changes the world. He topples governments, it's definitely I think a little more of a way of interacting with the DM.
Okay.
Too, I think, because if I'm only trying to progress my character, if I don't just talk about what I'm thinking to all the rest of the players, then you'll never know what's going on, there's lots of stories that we have here where I'm like, I have to tell you guys what's going on in my head because it's really complex. There's no way you're going to figure it out. And my character would never sit down around a fire and start talking to you. About it.
Wouldn't actually so it's not like you're not giving us context clues. It's not like, oh, like his brow was sweating feverishly. No, it's like, no, we're not doing that. It's like
if the heroes turn on the forgotten warforged forge that wasn't destroyed during the last war, you might have an army of warforged at your back. You might decentralize the entire government that you're in. You don't know what you're gonna do, but you do to make an effect. Your characters don't have to change. The world changed. Yeah.
That's really cool. I think so. I think that's interesting from a DM perspective. And one thing you said, Josh, was that you communicate like your character's kind of internal dialogue a little bit to us, so we know what's going on. And I think that's one thing. I think Jack, you do that too. I think that's to a degree. Like I like that we could just be upfront and we don't consider it like metagaming or like how would your character know that my character is thinking this? It's like, well, we don't have a writer's room, we're not world-class actors, we're doing a lot of this over Zoom calls or Roll20, whatever. It helps to have some insight, and we're all the style of player who can detach from that a little bit and just like, okay, this gives me an understanding of your character. I'm not going to use it to it in a metagaming like out
I think
screw over your character way or anything like that.
That does kind of lead into our dynamic a little bit, where it's like, okay, so if there are times, I know for a fact there are times we would have paid for our characters to know, like have instant thought transmission kind of like stuff. Like there are definitely times where it's like, man, I wish they would just get the message. But I think there is this part of playing a tabletop RPG that is fantastic, and you're supposed to be embodying these superhuman qualities of a character. And I think it's kind of nice the way that we cut some of that information barrier, right? Where it's like everyone in this situation probably has some type of sense of like what's going on, right? So it's like we don't have all the clues because we're not actually in that situation. So it's just kind of nice to think that like, yeah, my character would probably at some point have an inclination of like what Josh's character is thinking, or like maybe not. But it's like, as a player, I think it's nice to have that information, because then I can still find some kind of way to make it make sense that I would know that.
Well, it's just like these characters
and use it to like push the story forward. Sorry, every time.
No, I'm sorry. I was just like, these characters have been around maybe for like 10 levels together. They have almost died, if not already died, and been brought back. You don't think maybe like some fireside chat, like when they were like, I thought that was it, that maybe they would just happen to embellish one little thing about their personality to the other one? Maybe, these people who fight and die together, because soldiers don't ever do that, right? We have no stories of soldiers having bonds in wartime, right?
Absolutely not.
So it really makes them a lot more real when we're able to just kind of go back and go like, hey, by the way, you guys would definitely know right now that I'm so scared of spiders.
Yeah.
Like, so that giant spider, I'm not fighting it.
Not okay with it.
I'm running away from it.
I think that is kind of like one thing I like about playing together, is that none of us we're open like that. We're not trying to metagame. None of us are trying to like win at playing D&D. We're collectively trying to tell a story. We're trying to get to the same place, and we're all just trying to like have fun around the table. And we're not there is no real competition, I don't think, between the players. There's definitely sometimes competition between the characters, and I think that's really fun to focus on when like you have two characters that are like trying to like compete or like show off in some way. But I think it's really interesting playing with Josh, because normally I've found that Josh and I, without any planning, if you tell us both, like you give us a setting, 9 times out of 10, it seems like we're going to come up with backstories that kind of line up.
Yeah.
And it's like in Eberron, it happened with what was that subclass of barbarian?
Zealot.
Yeah, Zealot.
Zealot.
Yeah,
So
Zealot.
yeah, the radiant damage barbarian, and then I made the paladin of Bahamut pretty much.
Yeah.
And so it's just like we have these two like holy righteous characters. So that worked out. And then in Theros, we had the two characters who worshipped the more obscure gods. And
The older
then
ones. Yeah.
the older, the ones that existed before the other ones. And that was really cool that we did a campaign in Theros as well. So I think it's really cool that happens with me and Josh. Our characters kind of line up like that. That always turns out really well. And I think what I like about playing with Ben is, I think we've kind of like, through the context of all the discussion up to this point, like it should be obvious like why we like playing with Ben is like we like building characters that are exploring a world, and Ben likes to build a world for characters to explore. And it's just like this beautiful dynamic, I think.
Yeah. And I think during play, we're all of us are always interested in what's the interesting thing that could happen here. And that's why, sharing information is, you don't want somebody to be in the dark for no reason, because that's just boring. So it helps for people to share what's going on with their characters and explain things, unless there's a really good story reason not to. And I feel like we kind of sense that pretty well. I've been able to do like a few twists in campaigns you guys didn't see coming. Those are hard to do, and it's not like you don't want to like force it, especially you don't want to force plot in general. But I've been able to do that sometimes, and occasionally, like you said, if there's competition between characters, it makes sense to maybe withhold certain things. But for the most part, we take it on a case-by-case basis, because it's not about here's what my character does and screw the rest of the party. It's about what's going to make an interesting play experience. It's all about what happens at the table.
Yeah, it's all about the experiences that we can put together at the table. I think it's really cool how we do kind of play in a way that like focuses mainly on the story. And I think there's a little bit of us that does focus on mechanics a little bit. I think we all like a little bit, to not necessarily like power game, but like when I made a paladin, I was like, how ridiculous can this paladin get? And so I think that's a really cool dynamic that we have too. And probably one that I think that might be where the only time our games get kind of pushed out of, I guess, what would that be? Not fun, but like sometimes they get a little ridiculous, and it's like, okay, we probably pushed the mechanics of this too far. There have been a couple of times where Ben's like, you guys need to pump the brakes a little bit.
It doesn't seem fair anymore.
Yeah. And there's like the Eberron game with any long campaign, sometimes things are going to get, a little out of hand, and sometimes you have to dial things back again. And also I was adding new mechanics too, because I was like, I got the, new source books, third-party source books that I want to try adding in elements to the games. And I mean, there's not a problem with focusing on mechanics, because the mechanics are the way you as a player have agency in the world. So it's just, there's lots of different ways to interpret that. There's, depending on play styles. So, I mean, it's just another part of the game. Like you have to kind of factor it in.
Yeah. And we've done a lot of that. We've played a lot. We played a lot together. I think we played a lot together. And
when you find something you like, you don't let it go.
Oh, and you find something that works. That works, you definitely don't let it go. We're all very chill. We're all very laid back. We don't let first off, we don't let the rules get in the way of the fun. I know there have been times where we hand wave stuff, and it's just like, it's like that doesn't seem like it'd be too important to really like dive too into. We do some like theater of the mind combat sometimes, where it's like the layout doesn't necessarily matter. Let's just like see how this goes. Sometimes that works out really well for us.
But we've got a lot of cool, right?
The rule of cool.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's coined anywhere, but I really like that phrase, the rule of cool.
Yeah. It is, but yeah, there's a reason. It is.
Yeah, right.
It's because it rhymes.
Because
No,
it's so cool. Bob
Yeah.
Dylan. Bob Dylan coined it back
Bob
in the
Dylan.
50s.
you're really cute.
But of all, we've definitely had a lot of memories. We've made a lot of moments at the table, and we've come so far with all these experiences. Do you guys have any favorite moments from the games that we've played?
Uh,
I'm mostly curious to hear from you guys first
There's-
as a DM. So
there's a
Ah.
lot. There's a lot. So my memory is a little bit fuzzy on all of it, but this wasn't one of the like the long games. This was the one shot in when we went to that hotel in Savannah for like one evening, and we played
Yeah.
one shot. We ate a lot of candy. Yeah, I drank a lot of like grain alcohol, and so the prep for that was a Pathfinder game, which we knew was like D&D 3.5 crunchier, and I think we were doing Gestalt. Was that right? If I remember that, where it was
no,
two
you
classes
just
at
had
once?
2 characters each.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
that's
it
okay.
was 2 characters.
So John Jones was the Healy Paladin that I built that was supposed to be a pacifist. And I made him because, well, if I recall, there was 4 characters, and I was like, sweet, have the damage be everybody else, have the best healer there is that also can't die, right? It seemed pretty great to me. I didn't realize that the final bad guy was a giant undead worm, which means that all of my pacifism doesn't have to work. And literally everything I do does double times damage to it. And I know we did other stuff, but I'm pretty sure my one guy, like, he basically in one round killed that enemy. And then we developed backstories for these guys, even though we knew it was a one shot. And like, he satisfied all of the pieces. Like, he was trying to like atone for the sins of his flesh, even though he was like a solar trapped inside of a human body. It was something very, very detailed. All I remember is that the action, the lead up, everything, like, it was a surprise. And it was just, and I don't know, it was all the math, all the dice. I remember it was like 36 D6 or something like that.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was something absurd
dumb.
like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just, like, it wouldn't have been an outcome I expected at all, so like I was like, I made all these mechanics to work, and then it did something even cooler thanks to like the design of the game.
Yeah, I remember we were even like in that last encounter, we were just like looking at it, we were just like, well, we didn't expect the healer to be able to like almost one shot the big bad, but while we're here, why not?
Why not?
And it shows why mechanics and role playing aren't mutually exclusive, because the mechanics backed up the story of your character and came through in an unexpected way.
Yeah. Let's see, favorite moment for me. I have a lot, and I'm going to mention 2. One is, of course, going to be the death of my paladin, Bakram, in the Eberron campaign at level 15. I'm going to say that one because there was like, I had it was a little bit outside of the game where that's one of my favorite reasons, because I had passively mentioned, I think a couple weeks prior, I was like, I think it'd be cool to like make a character related to this character, make him a fighter, and like just like play around with him for a little bit. And so like Ben was like, that's interesting. And so like that scene comes around where we meet what was her name? She was
Lady Ilmero.
Lady Ilmero. Yes, Lady Ilmero. We met her, we had a confrontation, and she ends up killing my paladin. And so like it's like combat still going on, like the Bakram dies. And I'm just like, I'm going to make a death roll. And Ben's like, no, you don't have to worry about it. I was like, oh, that's a death. Okay. And I was like, but the thing is, like, when that happens, I'm like, oh, there's some good story shit going on behind this. I know for a fact that like when the DM's just like, no, that character's just gone, roll with it. I'm just like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to roll with that. Roll with that.
Sean, that just speaks to like you, because like, how many other experiences have we all had where the player would just flip the table?
With not having a death roll, right?
You just killed him off? How dare you? Yeah.
So that's my lead in, because from that experience, we made Durakan, the fighter who was the brother of that paladin, went on a quest there. That character's death is actually one of my favorite moments. Like legitimately 100% probably one of my favorite moments of all time, because that was the two undead dragons underneath. Which city was that? It was
I think it was Atur, maybe.
Yeah.
In
Okay,
Karnath, one of the cities in Karnath.
yeah,
in
exactly.
the Eberron setting.
So the two undead dragons that were underneath there was like, we didn't realize we had sent the wrong people in to do that job, and we almost had like a party kill moment there, but the sorcerer was able to get away with the other fighter, and my fighter held the line. So that was like a really cool like moment. And then just like the way Ben described it too, was just like the like everything going black, but like the red like vampire dragon eyes like still remaining there. It was like the storytelling in that part was just so cool. And I felt like it was a really neat lead into like what happened after that too.
Yeah, and in both those cases, again, like the mechanics had a lot to do with it, because with Lady Ilmero killing Bakram, her breath ability, if you fall to 0 hit points, turns you into a zombie immediately. So there's like the mechanics right there, but the story spiraled off of the mechanics. And with Durakan's death, how was that related to mechanics? I lost my train of thought already. The reason that Durakan was killed and nobody else in the party died was because one of the other characters was able to teleport out but couldn't reach Durakan. So if the positioning had been different, Durakan would have gotten out of there too, but they couldn't. And again, great story spiraled off of this, just the way the combat
that's the mechanics
fell out.
Yeah,
and these
and
weren't forced moments, they just fell naturally from the game we were playing.
And I remember that because there was that moment where Josh was like, I can only get to one of you. I was like, oh my God, go for him. Let me do this.
It's just so funny because from like I remember like thinking it from well, it was a blasty sorcerer and I had all the teleport spells, right? So that was my goal with that. But between the two fighters, I knew for a fact, I was like, all right, Sean's character is actually the one that's worth saving the most, because back at full, he's scariest out of the two of them. And I was like, but that is not how this character would go. They were all siblings, right? So I was like, no, like Durakan's the big tough one. And mine was like, he would not accept me leaving Trezix behind. If I took him, he would never talk to me again anyways. And I had to make that decision, right?
And it's that. So that's the thing, right? Like we base it off a story when it's honestly like 50% of this decision is player vanity. I want to be the guy who's like, I'll hold him off, you know. That's really just like we know this is the thing. Like we know this is really why this is happening, but we came up with all these really cool story justifications for it to work out too. And it's just like between the mechanics and the way our play styles work and the story we're trying to tell, it all kind of just like works out into being this really cool moment. We do that with a lot of our favorite moments kind of just end up that way. But now that you've heard from us, Ben, what about you?
Yeah, so I think one of my favorite, just something that really stood out to me was, again, from the Eberron game, and again related to the secondary, the B team of characters that kind of spun off of the original party.
B squad.
Which we'll get into in the future, I'm sure. But short version was that the secondary characters went back to their homeland to consult with the dragon that raised and trained them to figure out what to do with all this, like, epic stuff going on in the campaign. So they got there, she was there, a couple other dragons are there, they kind of get them up to speed. It was mostly just this long role-playing session of getting them up to speed. What does this mean for everybody's characters? What does this mean for the returning dragon mark of death that the dragons supposedly wiped out thousands of years ago? And so, kind of came up to the conclusion. I think it was she looked at, it's like, so you're all in agreement that Bakram needs to accept the mark of death and learn its power. And you guys were all like, yeah, I think that's good. And I got to go, well, I'm afraid we can't let that happen. And all their eyes started glowing red because they were all vampires. And I'm like, I can't believe I pulled it off. I can't believe I got like a plot, without.
I remember that moment. Oh my God.
Without screwing you guys over on information. It felt fair to me to do a plot twist like that. That I didn't feel like I had like pulled the rug out from under you unfairly or anything. Especially, it kind of helped that we intended it to be a one shot anyway. But so all of a sudden, like, you're talking to your mentor, and all of a sudden it turns into a life or death battle with a bunch of dragon vampires, one of which was actually a remnant of Strahd von Zarovich in disguise, because you guys had fought him previously.
From that month and a half that we got stuck in Ravenloft.
No, that was great. The being stuck in Ravenloft was a fantastic like Halloween 3-month adventure.
3 months.
It was so long. It was good. And I remember that moment specifically. I think Josh and I had probably the same reaction, where it was just like, we're just like, something didn't click. It was just like, I was like, yeah, we think he would be a good candidate for this forgotten mark. And they're just like, I just watched like the split second after I said it, I watched your face lit up. I was like, oh no, what did we do? It was
so Ben, the plan was though to make it so that we build all these really great level 15 characters, and that you get to put the vampire template on them and then throw them back at us, right? That was your plan, right?
I knew that could have happened. Again, like it was in my mind. Yeah, it was in my mind as something that might happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, I'm not real big on plots. I mean, obviously, if I'm throwing a situation where you guys are overwhelmed by vampires, there's a possibility that those characters are going to get turned into vampires.
You can also fit that in any plot. I mean, just like surprise vampires. Anything. It really does.
I just happen to have a character with teleport.
So, you had a magic item to let you teleport everybody out. Because I mean, I was thinking it was a very strong likelihood. It wasn't a particularly balanced encounter. It wasn't meant to be. Because
I remember the dragon itself like did its breath weapon and you were something like, this is 80 damage, and that happened, and that's when I was like, good thing I took this staff, because we are getting the hell out of here right now. I was like,
you had to do the math of can I move and get everybody within range in the next turn before, because I think Trezix dropped immediately. I think
Durakon got hit really bad.
I think, didn't Durakon get possessed by Strahd and like drop Trezix or something? I can't remember.
I think that's what it was.
It was pretty nasty. But you guys got out of it, which with that's one lesson of a high level campaign, is sometimes you can ratchet things up, and chances are they're going to pull something out of it.
And it's only because I knew like somewhere in Eberron, there was like a monastery of like blue dragons that were separate from everywhere else. They were good aligned, they were protectors. And I was like, that's probably a good place for like my character to have been studying for all this time, whatever it was doing. And I was like, she would need a way to get back up there. I was like, so they probably give her this staff. That's why she had the staff. It wasn't any idea of I'm going to run away from anything. It was actually it was like really quickly made up backstory decisions that made it so that the entire game was changed, right?
I love that. I mean, stuff. So much spiraled out of.
I love that stuff.
The B team.
I definitely want to go into that B squad at some point for sure, because there's just so many good memories. And honestly, I think we're gonna have to have an episode, like one of our first episodes will have to be talking about just the layout of that Eberron game and the scope for future episodes. It's just we're gonna have to talk about it. But I think now it's time for our first segment where we gain inspiration, called Gain Inspiration. So I want to talk to you guys about, we touched on it a little bit already. Like Ben said, he likes using some history and fantasy novels as inspiration. But is there anything specific or anything that kind of like really inspires you when it comes to playing tabletop RPGs? Like, what do you bring from outside to like into the game? Like, what inspires you as far as like story, character generation, atmosphere, whatever it is? What inspires? What do you draw inspiration from?
Yeah, personally, D&D really sparked a big interest in history for me. So I got into medieval history, um, pretty amateur history buff, and then previously I had been interested in mythology and folklore. So this just kind of helped ramp all that up. So I draw a lot of like real world inspiration. I've run a few different like pseudo historical campaigns where I try to draw in a lot of their mythology and folklore and make new monsters and set up a world. It's kind of part of that world building thing of, I really like this particular culture at this one time. How can I translate that into a game world for people to explore and hopefully try to pass on some of that information? And besides that, also just a lot of fantasy stuff. I'm a big fan of the older like pulp fantasy, so like Conan, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, Elric, the classic sword and sorcery stuff. Earlier when Josh was talking about a character who stays themselves and impacts the world around them, that's Conan. That's he doesn't go through a lot of character development. You see different sides of him in different stories, but for the most part, he's the unstoppable force moving the world.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So that's a big finder. And then, well, yeah, outside of gaming, that's probably my biggest stuff.
Yeah. I actually read one of those Conan novels. I thought that was actually really interesting to see how he's Conan as a pirate. He's still just Conan. He's still just Conan.
And that really influenced old school D&D. It's kind of like people point to Lord of the Rings as being a big influence, and obviously it was, but a lot of that like Conan and Elric stuff, law versus chaos, and the idea of a lone adventurer, like whose main goal is to kill things and get rich. Well, that's your average D&D player. So it's just as much of D&D, the DNA of fantasy gaming as the epic fantasy stuff.
It's still on brand, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Josh, what about you?
Well, like for me, it's, I guess, interesting. Like the fantasy part that I got from Dungeons and Dragons immediately all really spawned from like the illustrations that I had from Magic the Gathering. I like that. That's what drew me into Magic the Gathering in the first place. So the idea of like visualizing these things that somebody else already had done in a certain way, the idea of monsters and stuff, that was a lot of inspiration. But it's just it's a very odd question, right? Because when I was 18, I now literally have as much time from 18 to now, more time than I did up to 18 to absorb information, content, and ideas. And I think, as we all know, we've gotten older. The amount of content that's put out there is too much for any person to actually get. We're doing it right now, right?
Blown up. Blown up. So
we're making
much
content right now. So from younger, I'd say I got a lot of inspiration for the characters themselves from comic books, anime, and cartoons. I think my definition of what lawful good is defined by Obi-Wan Kenobi from A New Hope, right? And that's a good lawful good. And when I think, they errata Jedis, but like he's a good one, right? And then like chaotic evil is Hexus from Fern Gully, right? Something that's simply built on destruction and death of anything else. So you have those extremes on the way a character thinks. What those have worked out, though, always seems to be what I would say equivalent to a DC or Marvel street level hero, such as like Wildcat or like Katana, or maybe even like, in the Druids, which I love, Captain Planet, honestly.
Yeah.
Big inspiration. Obviously, it's like, the idea is that he had like, someone explained it to me, is like, I was like, what's like create fire. I like create fire. That's cool. And he's like, yeah, but you throw it at things. I was like, you what? Like, it just says like, hey, you throw it at things. I'm like, that's what that guy did with the ring, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like, 80s kids have a lot of source for teams of people that work together to overcome adversity, right? That really hit its stride, I think, are in the 80s. Think about Power Rangers, and then every single other iterative of Power Rangers, Beetleborgs, VR Troopers. I think it's having a clear, defined good and bad has always worked out really well for me.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the world is so gray.
I think about, so you have like all those like 80s kids like cartoons. You had like Transformers, the G.I. Joe, the Ninja Turtles.
Optimus Prime is a paladin, if you've ever met one.
If you think about it, yeah.
He really is.
Space robot paladin.
Space robot paladin.
My favorite kind. Yeah, and so I can actually kind of relate. I can definitely relate. I grew up watching those bad 80s sword and sorceries movies, so like Beastmaster, Legend, Labyrinth. The Hobbit has been my favorite book since I was a little kid, so drawing a lot on Tolkien, but also like having been introduced to Dungeons and Dragons at a very young age. I kind of feel like it's like I kind of just have always drawn on like the nature of the game itself. I've read a ton of the old, and I have to like definitely preface this, like I've read a lot of the older manuals more than I have like the newer stuff. I completely skipped 4th edition, didn't touch it at all. Played a ton of 3rd and 3.5. So just always like kind of drew from those source books for inspiration, like just the heart of the game, soul of the game, what it always kind of has been. But I also do like to draw from stuff like, like I said, Tolkien, and like Legend is just like such a cool like when I think of evil and like atmosphere, that is kind of like a huge thing for me. Is like, no, like the darkness is like he's evil, like that's lawful evil.
Yeah.
He's just,
I love
like,
the way they do fairies in Legend. It's great.
Yeah. And so like, and that also, because of that stuff also draws off of like folklore that I've just like picked up. Mythology was a huge thing, of course, like thinking about the Norse gods, the Egyptian gods, the Olympic gods, thinking about all of that stuff and the mythology and the way the heroes and villains of those particular stories made their decisions, and like the just legends of all that was really kind of interesting to think about when creating a character. But also like looking for like cool magic, like looking for cool tales of weird creatures to like pull into. I think for the Theros campaign, drawing on some of that Greek mythology kind of ideas of what makes a hero versus what makes a good person, like all of that kind of stuff is really interesting, I think, when drawing inspiration. But I'd be lying if I didn't say Tolkien wasn't like like that's
I for one am shocked.
Yeah, right.
It's you hit on the mythologies. Like I was an inside kid, so like I had read all those things too. It's sometimes I don't even think of like the fact that those are like stories to inspire. They seem so intrinsic to everything else that's come after it, right?
Yeah.
That you don't see Hercules anymore, except for when I was growing up watching Hercules Legendary Journeys. Or Xena,
Kevin Sorbo, yeah.
Kevin Sorbo, right? Obviously, we knew Hercules then.
I learned a lot about mythology from Kevin Sorbo, yeah.
Yeah, right. I learned a lot about it, even though it was really wrong most of the time.
Very wrong.
But you at least went and did the research to realize it was wrong. But those like his story is just so placed into so many other heroes and the general hero's journey, right? That it's very easy to draw your inspiration, I think, for any character idea. Right, from just the tenets of mythos, not even a specific character itself.
I think there's a lot to be said about how much like mythologies are kind of like copy pasted from other mythologies too.
Yeah,
they're always like telling the same story in new ways so that they're relevant to what's going on now. So taking the bits you like and applying it to something new is very much in the spirit of mythology.
Yeah.
Because I mean, half of Greek mythology is stolen from other cultures around the Mediterranean. I mean, it's we call it Greek mythology, but it's really Mediterranean mythology.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's cool. And we're going to have plenty of time to talk about all the different stuff we draw inspiration on as we talk about the Eberron campaign, the Theros campaign, all the one shots, the Middle Earth campaign. I draw a lot of inspiration from video games. We have a Mass Effect campaign that we're playing with Trevor. Video game, yeah, I could go into how much video games have shaped my inspiration for characters and stuff too.
Yeah, God of War has been a big influence on the Theros game. Obviously, like Zelda games are in my mind when I'm designing dungeons.
Yep.
God of War is pretty much responsible for any type of like hostile character that I have. That's just about like, I'm gonna destroy. It's all Kratos.
That's all Kratos.
It's
That's great.
Kratos. Well, he's an unlikable hero, right? Like, you really is unlikable. And yet, how many games has he been in?
So
how many
many
games are you him? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about we're playing like that Mass Effect campaign, even like pulling stuff from I made a ranger based on the ranger from Shadow of Mordor, and that was for a one shot, and that was super fun. And that ended up somehow bleeding over into the Middle Earth campaign. And so like we have so much content.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness it did.
I know. Oh my God. I'm so excited for the next session of that, because I've got that adventure planned too, guys. We got to play that soon.
Adventures of Middle Earth is great if you want to fight orcs, but also talk about your feelings afterwards.
A lot.
Also run from your problems.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Lots of running from
it's way too many wargs.
Sometimes
there's just so many wargs, man.
As well, yeah. They're also I could gush about that game, but we're gonna have to play that again soon, because I have the next adventure planned, and I can't wait to record and talk about that and everything else that we have going on. Before we close out, Ben, is there anything else you wanted to mention for this episode?
Not really. I think I'm really excited to talk. We have so much to talk about. Obviously, we've been touching on lots of moments from campaigns. We've played a lot of games. We've had a lot of great moments, and like I said, hopefully we can just give some insight onto why our games work well.
And then maybe other people can learn from us, and in that way, we can make it so strangers can start playing faster together.
I really like that idea. I like the idea of kind of giving people an insight into like what a long-term gaming group looks like, how it functions, and how it can work kind of cohesively. And it's not, I think it can be really disheartening when you're trying to do pickup groups all the time and the dynamic doesn't just click. But I think we're going to have sorry, what were you going to say?
No, it's just, I can recall Ben saying it's like, there's the weirdest idea they had, that we need to get at least 5 socially awkward people together that don't know how to talk, and they need to work together to solve problems.
Yeah,
that sounds like a good idea, right?
That sounds like a great idea. You can put it on a resume, and you can. It's also somehow the formula for an escape room.
It's a game about being cooperative, but every single character is incentivized to be an edgelord, and be brooding in the back of the tavern.
Yep.
For a cooperative game, there's not much in D&D that actually talks about how to do that part well. It doesn't, like, nobody wants to tell somebody they're bad at being social, so they just avoid giving advice at all, like in the rule book. So I mean, or minimal, I would say. I think it's I think like a behind the curtain look, as opposed to like a live play, especially with people who are maybe more interested in being entertaining and theatrical, getting just a little bit more like, no, this is what it's like when some regular people just sit down and play. And sometimes we got to have conversations. Sometimes things don't go well, but sometimes they do. And we're trying to figure that out.
I think the way that I have this experience of when I tell other people about our D&D game, they are simultaneously entertained and jealous. So that's what I want to bring to the masses. This has been Roll Havoc. It's been such a pleasure to sit here and talk with you two gentlemen. It's been a fantastic time. And this is Jack Steelman reminding you to get your bards spayed or neutered. Have a good week, everybody.